I think everyone just come back for lunch, so we're going to need to get you all to wake up a little bit, and hopefully this panel will wake you up. Glad to be here back at the WIPCon after 2 years, and I see how it's definitely evolving into something that is showing true progression. I think we've moved from the theme of rising and we've gone to the theme of wandering, which is talking more about the fact that we're not just climbing the ladder, we're now getting to a point where where we've climbed, but now we're looking around and saying, well, what next? And we can actually imagine and think about what ifs. And today's discussion will be focusing on that concept of what if and how we can achieve those what ifs that we would have. We're talking today more about things like sponsorship versus mentorship, which are two very different things. And truly you need to think about what if mentorship is not enough. And frankly, it's not. What if we need to move towards something far more catalytic, something where we are actually utilizing the force of sponsorship itself. And sponsorship is not. Mentorship is when we have someone who we can talk to and we can bounce ideas off, and they can help us sort of tackle day-to-day challenges. But sponsorship is far riskier for the actual sponsor, right? They're putting their name out on the line to help other people get into roles that are befitting, hopefully, of their capabilities. But what we have, especially for women, even though mentorship is there and organizations give you that, even a Harvard Business Review has basically made it very clear that generally women are sponsored 24% less than men in general across the globe. And this is why we see so much where once women get to that middle management level, they get stuck. That transition, from intention to action of getting more women within our senior leadership positions is failed often because there is a lack of sponsorship. So today what we're going to be doing, we have an amazing panel lined up, and we're going to be having a discussion with our panelists with regards to why that happens, what their personal experiences are with regards to sponsorship for themselves, for other people they may have sponsored, and basically how to bridge that gap between intention and action when it comes to seeing more women in senior leadership. So we're going to try to move beyond nice intentions and nice policies and figure out the actual facts and what's actually happening on the ground in many different organizations, in different sectors. And for that, I would need to basically invite our amazing panelists onto the stage and dive into our panel of hopefully very interesting questions and revelations. I can hear a bit of noise in the background. If everyone can please settle down. I can promise this is going to be an interesting panel, so please try to focus. And having said that, now I'm going to start welcoming our panelists one by one. Joining us from the social innovation space, we have Umair Ahmed, CEO of Now PDP, a remarkable organization that's dedicated to inclusion for persons with disabilities. Umair brings a radical lens of accessibility, dignity, and intersectionality to every leadership conversation that he's a part of. Welcome, Umair. Round of applause, please, everyone. Next up, please put your hands together for Fawad Sumro, CEO of Dawood Foundation, where he champions inclusive education, sustainability, and social impact. With roots in both corporate and development sectors, he brings a unique lens on embedding equity into legacy institutions and enabling underrepresented voices to move from the margins and into the mainstream. Welcome, Fawad. A warm welcome, please put your hands together for Ali Gul Faraz, who is the newly appointed CEO of Dubai Islamic Bank Pakistan. With a track record of steering institutions through transformation, Ali is known for progressive leadership and championing women's advancement in an industry that's not always known for its inclusion. Welcome, Ali. Please have a seat wherever you're comfortable. And last but not least, rounding off this incredible lineup is Arshaduddin Ahmed, CEO of IFCO, a global FMCG and industrial conglomerate with extensive cross-sector leadership experience. He offers us a systems-driven perspective on how large organizations will operationalize leadership accountability and what it takes to move beyond individual intent to scalable structural change. Welcome, Arshad. Okay, a round of applause for all of our participants. And we will get started. Please grab your mics, everyone. So, welcome everyone. To get started, I guess what I would like each of you to do is start with just a quick 1-minute story related to sponsorship. It can be, I mean, ideally women-focused, but it doesn't absolutely have to be. What I'm really trying to establish here is the importance of sponsorship within an organization to help people manage and get from that mid-level in management to actually get to a proper leadership position. What have you, in your experience, had when you've either been a sponsor or someone who has been sponsored, and something that's really changed your perspective on things, or something that's really made you feel that it's made a huge difference in someone's life? So we start with you, Umair, if you give us one of yours, and then we'll just move around.
Thank you once again. I would like to show my appreciation to PSTD for inviting us to this very august panel. All the luminaries that are gathered on the stage here, and the far bigger luminaries out there in the crowd. It's a pleasure to be here. Addressing your question, the one that you started with, I think as you were mentioning that all the stories that I've encountered in my life, in my professional life, were going through my mind from the mountains of Gilgit-Baltistan of empowerment and sponsorship to the basins of Thatta Badin. We are a disability inclusion organization, so hamari ruh ke andar, in our spirit, inclusion is embedded. Diversity and inclusion. So as a starting point, I think that's been one of the pivotal drivers of change making. And when I recall particular stories of change makers, in Gilgit-Baltistan, we had an all-female, all-woman-led team that brought about inclusion to 100 schools to make them inclusive of children with disabilities. And the fact that this team used to fly every year and go to rural Gilgit-Baltistan at a time when earthquake had shattered the infrastructure, emphasized to me that once you go beyond mentorship and give sponsorship, they can take the lead, take the mantle, and make a huge difference. Fast forward down to the height of COVID. We had two of the most fantastic leaders of our organization that braved COVID and went out to one of the most dilapidated districts in Sindh and reconstructed a school that to this day has allowed for 7,000 plus persons with disabilities to access benefits. So whenever we see in terms of mentorship versus sponsorship, we have yielded the benefits of it. We have seen people who have taken the opportunity when they're sponsored to take the mantle and actually deliver results that were far beyond our expectations as well. So for us, be that the mountains of Gilgit-Baltistan at the height of earthquakes, or at the height of COVID, to be in the basins of Thatta Badin, or anywhere in between, we have seen that sponsorship has yielded what our spirit has so demanded, and that is why we strongly believe in the message of sponsorship.
Okay, thank you for that. Arshad, would you kindly give us an example where you feel it truly had an impact? And again, we're talking about something that's structurally within an organization impacted the way that someone got to success or helped someone soar, whether it's yourself, whether it's someone you sponsored.
Sure. I mean, if I talk specifically about the corporate world, the organizations, how they work, in my personal experience, I've seen that people who were extremely talented, who were extremely high potential employees, I've seen a lot of them derailing their career because they didn't have good sponsors to support them. Yet at the same time, people with the same talent or a little less, having good talent sponsors, they actually grew in the organization. If I look at my own career, I had numerous amount of mentors, but I can clearly imagine 2 sponsors that I got. And if I look at my entire career, which spans up to like 27, 28 years, I think the biggest impact that which those 2 sponsors made, I mean, if they hadn't been in my life, in my professional life, I think my success story would have been completely different. And so going forward, I mean, taking it back, I've always thought that it was important in every organization that I've worked that it's important to become one of the sponsors. However, sponsorship is a two-way thing. So somebody will be, you have to have takers to get a sponsor. So the individual, the employees, they also have to show some eagerness and potential to get some sponsors. And let me tell you one thing. If you are a young employee in an organization, if you really ambitious about your career, you need to have a solid sponsor. And to get a solid sponsor, not only you have to identify one within your organization, but you also have to exhibit and show the keenness that you are there for an effective sponsorship for you to grow professionally in the organization.
Thank you, Arshad. Fawad?
Thank you, Shabnam. Thank you, PSTD, for inviting us to this great event. So, taking the cue from what Arshad just said, that one comes across, various opportunities, आपको career में sponsors मिलते हैं. Arshad has been my sponsor in my time in Engro Polymer also. I think the key is to be alive to the situation because context matters a lot. हर organization का अपना जो है वो कुछ culture होता है, कुछ history background and norms होते हैं. So one of the examples that I can give from my experience in Engro Foundation, and by the way, I come from development sector technically now, but I have a little bit of corporate background also. So one of the things over there was, contextually, we were losing a couple of very brilliant female team members because they weren't in position to work full time. And as such, we don't have, very explicit policy of part-time workers in the organization. And so that was a very unique situation. And fortunately, because हमारे पास थोड़ी flexibility थी कि because both those employees happened to be on contract, so I had greater liberty in terms of setting the norms. And the mere change of allowing them to work according to their availability of hours, we were successfully retained both the employees, and it's like what 12th year that she's working with us and adding great value to the organization. So I think some of the solutions or the elements of sponsorship would not be in any textbook. You won't be able to benchmark. I think it's being alive to the situation. The context gives you opportunity as well as constraints. Yeah.
Thank you, Fawad. And again, what we're seeing here is a live example. Fawad is currently the CEO of Dawood Foundation. Previous to that, he was managing Engro Foundation, and he's telling you that Arshad was a sponsor of his at some point earlier in his career. So here we're seeing a live example of what sponsorship can do and where it can bring you. Moving on, last but not least, to Ali. Tell us a little bit from your side about your experiences, please.
Thank you, Shabnam. I'm also very pleased to be invited here. So as I have just completed about a week in my current assignment at DIB, I'm going to talk about a specific case from my past. So this is going back some time. In London, I was working for Bank of America. And my boss got recruited to a very senior position at another bank in London, and it was a kind of a plan to really build up this banking franchise in Europe. And there was so he basically asked me to come and be his deputy. So this is like a two-way sponsorship story. So first, my boss persuaded me to come and be his deputy in this new organization. And then when I was looking at joining this new organization with a lot of hard work that needed to be done and thinking, okay, it would be good if I could have someone that I could trust and rely upon as well. So there was a young lady who used to work there and I had a lot of interaction with, and she was in a support function, and she was due to transfer from London to New York, something that she had been looking forward to, and less than 1 week before her flight, I approached her and tried to convince her to abandon plans to relocate. So initially, I realized that I was doing this for my own benefit, but it took a bit of persuasion, but she eventually agreed. And when she joined over there, I realized that now her success was something that I, as you mentioned earlier, so I had personal stake in her success because I persuaded her, one, to leave an outstanding opportunity to go to New York, to leave the organization, and to move from a support function to a frontline business development role. I have to say that my concerns were unfounded. In the end, I felt very at ease with the way that she developed into that new role. And from the team that used to report to me, she became one of the most consistent performers, very reliable, somebody that I never had to double check on. She was always prepared, perhaps sometimes over prepared. And I learned to rely upon her always being, meeting and exceeding the objectives. And several years later, I was very pleased that we were able to promote her to become the first managing director, female managing director in the bank in a business development function over there. So I think that it took an initial period of sponsorship, but she took full advantage of that. She showed the commitment and determination, and she came through with shining colors and became the star performer in the team. So I'm very proud of that example.
Thank you. That's a lovely example. Again, as you can see, there's a variety of ways in which people can be sponsored and supported. I myself, having spent 27 years in investment banking and private equity, can for sure pin my success in my career to one particular sponsor, someone who stepped into my professional life 20 years ago. And to this day, I'm in touch with him, and I am always grateful that he was there at that moment when I was very junior and technically, a British Pakistani at Deutsche Bank in London. And he ultimately, I approached him, so correct, as Arshad was saying, it's a two-way process, but I approached him for sponsorship, and that was essentially the start of my career going in exactly the direction it went in. And 20 years on now, I was the first female board member, for example, for Dubai Islamic Bank Pakistan. I was the CEO of a private equity company at age 39. But again, I accredit all of that to that one single move. And quite frankly, after having initially sponsored me, 15 years later, 12 years later, he rehired me into his own private equity firm, and I became the CEO of that firm as well. So sponsorship goes a long, long way. You have multiple examples of that sitting here on this stage, and it's a very important aspect. But Ali, coming back to you now for the next question. If we're honest, most companies tend to believe that mentorship should be enough. But we know from data that women often end up stalling before they reach leadership positions, and usually it's because of the gap and the lack of mentorship. So what is it that holds leaders, you think, or institutions back from actually providing sponsorship to women?
So I think it's a fairly broad set of issues, but I think the first thing is that you have to start from a place of truly believing in enabling women in leadership positions. And I'll give an example. Personally, one of my hobbies is cycling. And there's something we talk about in cycling, which is the sort of the weight to power ratio. And there is a story of a bunch of middle-aged men cycling together, and they're always sort of going to the cycling shop and upgrading, components of their bicycle, spending a lot of money to try and get a little bit faster. So there's this one chap, he's not very knowledgeable, and he goes to the cycling shop and says, my mates are always, someone is buying a new wheel set, someone is buying a new frame, and so on, and they're always talking about this. So what should I do to become faster? And this cycling shop basically tells him that you can spend money on 1,000 pounds on wheels or so on and so forth. But he said that, or you can shed 10 pounds, 10 kilos, and you'll do it for free and you'll be much faster. So the reason I bring that up is that if we are going to have on the cycle one person pushing and carrying the weight of another person, you go slower. So if we want to drive our economy, both partners, the man and the woman, need to be driving and pushing, and I think that dramatically alters the power to weight ratio of the household, of the company, of the economy. So starting point is to believe in it. I think beyond that, what I would say is that one of the issues that you mentioned earlier is that you have a personal stake at risk when you sponsor somebody. And I think the other thing is also that you have to have a two-way commitment. And so I think that if the organization starts first from believing that having women in leadership is the right thing, then you should try and create awareness and invite people, both from leadership positions and the women in the organization, to try and think about this and approach this. So I think it is, what I would say is that the role of the women is very important, because you have to raise your hand and you have to want this. So the initiative has to come from both sides.
Fair enough. Arshad, what is your view? Like, what is stopping more organizations or more people within organizations from providing sponsorship? You know, is there some kind of a fear of backlash? Is there reputational concern? What is it?
You know, Shabnam, I think the most important thing is the culture of the organization. And that is why if somebody comes to me for an advice, if he or she has got a good job opportunity, I always advise them to look at the organization from the cultural aspect, because that is the most important thing. The pay scales and the other things, they come later. No matter how big an organization it may be, if the culture is not right, it ain't going to do any good for you. So first thing is the culture. However, at the same time, so there's no, what I see is, if there's no culture of sponsorship, so be it men or women, nobody is going to get that chance. And usually such organizations are infested with politics and everything. Everybody is more concerned about preserving their own positions rather than thinking of the organization in terms of the people's development. So I think this is one thing. So I think culture is most important. So whenever you decide to take up an opportunity, please double check, triple check the kind of culture that you're getting into, and then make an informed decision.
Thank you, Arshad. And then Umair, I guess, how do you measure a personal level of success when it comes to, again, the same question really, if, what is it that's stopping people, and how does one measure their success as a sponsor or an organization's success as a sponsor?
So I think just taking the point that Arshad Saab made a little further, culture is extremely important, but I think one of the elements also that we have added on to it is the value system of the organization. I think there's some people sitting here who are industry leaders, and one of the things that we've learned from them, is the bottom-up value system has to be implemented. And in that, everyone has to be a stakeholder. So the value system that is embedded within an organization has to have the gender lens on very clearly at a very early stage, so that anyone entering feels a sense of safety and security. Then I think having a very clear, the security of a leader has to show through. They cannot be an insecure individual that they feel constantly threatened, because I think that concept really derails the progress of an organization. So for an individual to be very secure in their own role, they will be able to bring the best possible talent on board and sponsor them in the right possible way. I think, Shabnam, you are a great example of that as well. The third thing that I think is flipping what is perceived to be culturally a disadvantage into advantages. I think that's the most important thing. Often, when I was starting my career about 20 years ago, the question was retention is challenged, at least in the women's sphere, by the fact that they might get married or they might have to go and take a career break. Well, if they get married or they have to start a family, the time management skills are going to be fantastic. And we have benefited directly from the people who have come in, who have been given that liberty to be part of it and to give their time off. And that equity, they've managed to perform far better. And they've managed to turn a perceived disadvantage into an advantage. So the value system, the security of the leader is extremely important. And the last thing that I must emphasize is the fact that when people walk into an institution, flip the disadvantages that have been perceived as disadvantages into an advantage, because without that, we will be stuck in the 20, 25-year-old, age-old bracket that we don't want to be confined to.
Thank you for that. So, yeah, of course, there's the old saying that if you want something done, give it to someone who's very busy. And when we think about, mothers and people who are managing a household and are still working at the same time, you will see that they're some of the most efficient multitaskers you'll ever have met. So I think that's a very valid point, that you need to make into an advantage what is generally considered a disadvantage, that, oh, they're going to go off and have a family and so on. By the way, if they don't go off and have a family, who will? It's not like we have the choice to flip those roles. Otherwise, believe me, I'm sure many people would. Moving to forward, we talked about culture here, but the way I see it is culture is either a silent ally or it's a silent killer. So what aspects of your organization's culture helped women rise, and what had to change to actually enable that to happen? Forward, please.
So it's, the legacy businesses, organizations have very long-standing cultures. I mean, corporates tend to have, a greater chance to reset, I believe, with change in leadership. But with family businesses, it's I think, much more entrenched culture. It takes longer to, I think, have any change. And like you said, some elements would always be, more favorable. Some would not be. हम पाकिस्तान में रहते हैं, so most of organizations tend to be very conservative, and so हमारे पास भी जो है वो it's it's a kind of a typical environment where we have a large workforce of men, conservative, and of course उसके साथ जो associated norms आते हैं कि काम तब होता है जब तक the person is physically present in the office. I think that was one of the biggest barrier perceived against women, because women have multiple responsibilities. So I think COVID really helped in that sense. कुछ हमारे तबक रोशन हुए, और hybrid work became a reality, and now we took advantage of that, and it was very strategically used, and now this is not held against women in our team, for example, that आप एक fixed hour पे चले जाते हैं. So there's option of hybrid contribution, and so they kind of contribute sitting from their homes, and so that in a way has gone away. Of course, there is a religious element also, where Pakistan में again हम लोग हैं, conservative society है. So those norms kind of pull the organization down, but at the same time, when it comes to favorable things, जब चीज़ें करनी होती हैं वो भी फिर फौरन हो जाती हैं. So just to give you, I'm sure a lot of greater part of audience is actually from Karachi, and I hope आप लोग जो हैं, you have been to TDF's Magnificence Center. If you haven't, please take time out and visit the place. That place, in many ways, explains what the culture of the organization is, because anything like that doesn't exist in Pakistan still. It's first ever interactive science museum, and when we started to set it up, there were no benchmarks. And with sheer resilience of our vice chair, Sabrina, who is a visionary when it comes to informal education, I think she persisted in a way that, and the entire culture of the organization kind of singularly subscribed to that idea and made it happen while we were actually going through COVID restrictions.
And so at unbelievable pace, we have now a very unique intervention. And so I think, like you said, there are positives, there are negatives. Culture takes a lot of time to change, but having a sponsor who is powerful, that really helps in terms of bringing in change.
Thank you, Fawad. Ali, I want to ask you about the same question, really. What aspects of your organization's culture helped women rise? But also from the perspective of, biases in, bias interruption in banking, and also how are leaders within your specific industry held to be accountable, to be more inclusive, like beyond the state bank's quotas and so on?
So I think, firstly, as you mentioned earlier on, culture can be an enabler and it can be an obstacle. And one example that I can reference is that when I joined Bank of Khyber, it had a dismally low ratio of women in the bank. And I was told that this is our culture in the province and you won't be able to change it. So where it's an obstacle, there has to be a commitment from the leadership to, to drive change. And I'm very pleased that we doubled the ratio of women in a little over a year and a half. So it can be done. Often we have stereotypes which are confused with culture as well. And one example that I received today when I was talking to somebody in my team and noticed that there weren't any women in their function. And the answer I got back was, well, we do a lot of late sitting and women are unwilling to, so they just have taken this kind of a bias or stereotype and made a decision that women will not fit in that group. So I think you have to challenge that. The important thing also is that we have to create spaces for women in the decision-making process. Another example of my previous bank was that there was a purpose-built building, very nice, beautiful purpose-built building that was made, and there was a committee of people, seniors, who were involved in all aspects of it, and there wasn't any women in that. So I did a tour of that building in the last few weeks of it being completed, and as I was touring, I was shown a very beautiful, modern kind of ablution room with lots of stations, and I noticed that there wasn't one for women. And similarly, if there were the washroom facilities were lacking for women. So I asked them, where are the facilities for women? And suddenly I found a silent response and nobody had an answer. Nobody had thought about it, and nobody planned when this building was being designed, 7 years before that. Nobody seemed to have planned for women being part of the workforce and thinking about them. So I think it's important to include women in the decision-making process, to have their perspective, and it is a leadership issue as well. You have to drive that from the top down. You have to involve them. And what I would say is that there is inertia in every culture, whether that is a societal culture, whether that is an organizational culture. And I would say that it is up to the women to claim their space in that, to demand their space, to demand to be heard. And so, people usually don't vacate space. You have to push for it, and you have to ask and demand it and earn it.
Yeah, that's a whole different discussion altogether, I think, but fair enough. Yes, I do agree with that, by the way. As women, we do have to demand our space, but of course, at the same time, the environment needs to allow it, because not every woman is necessarily going to have that demeanor to want to push things through. So, for example, I gave my example that, yes, I went looking for my own sponsor, but then I'm a Pathan and I grew up in between two boys in my household, so yeah, nobody really considers me to be a typical girl, right? But in the case there are others, and this is why we talk about inclusion and diversity, is because we have a lot more softer spoken women and who have their own demeanor, and we don't want them to have to step out of their own element to be able to get the same opportunities as their male counterparts. But as I said, this is a discussion for a whole different time. But again, it's a combination, right? We as women have to fulfill our role of stepping up and being ready to step up. And then when we do step up, as Ali was saying, the person he sponsored exceeded all his expectations and he almost never had to watch her. So we need to make sure that whoever does sponsor us doesn't regret it. So that's us doing our part. But at the same time, there needs to be some institutionalized and systemized sponsorship or systems in place that enable these types of sponsorships to happen. And that brings me to my final question before we open up to the audience, and that's basically with regards to systems. Sponsorship doesn't scale if it's just done independently and it's only depending on the goodwill of an individual who's going to sponsor someone because they feel like it. So given your organization is obviously regional and global, how, for example, have you embedded into your systems or your structures or your leadership expectations the idea of institutionalized sponsorship, especially for women?
Okay, it has to start as a commitment from the top. And only words are not going to do any good. It has to be action, action, and action. I mean, if you have a great plan or strategy, if you don't execute well, I mean, it's of no use. So I'll just give you an example of IFCO Pakistan. In IFCO, in our leadership team, out of 7 people, 3 are women. So this is, once you take this action, if there are sponsors up there and people can actually see our employees that they have an opportunity to reach to the leadership level. And we are also constantly striving towards increasing our gender diversity percentage, and that has to come from the top. I mean, you have to provide suitable platform in the organization to the women who can actually then aspire to reach that level. So although it's a two-way street, but the first step has to be taken by the organization, and it has to start from the top. And that is why as management, we also have to see, because for ages we have been hearing that hire people who are culturally fit, and this matters a lot. So if you have a leadership team where everybody is culturally fit in terms of developing or professionally providing a platform to the women to actually grow in the organization, everything is going to change. And I have seen women who have, if given fair platform, I mean, they have done wonders. So as I mentioned, out of 7, 3 of us are women, and it brings in a lot of diversity, different thought process, and it actually helps in good, solid, healthy decision making.
Thank you, Arshad. Okay, guys, we have literally not that much time left, so what I would request is for the answers to be a little bit short now so that we can at least give the audience also a chance to ask us some questions. So, Ali, the same thing. I mean, how do you make sponsorship a part of the leadership DNA of an organization, or how do you see that?
Okay, so I think I was having this conversation with our head of HR today. So we have to sensitize the organization and the leaders within the organization to having representation of women in leadership roles. For that, we are going to create some kind of target for people to do that and to identify star performers within the organization that we can encourage. Just to clarify quickly my earlier comment, I absolutely believe that the organizations need to create an enabling environment for women to progress. But what I meant was that, and the best organizations do that, but women shouldn't only rely upon a top-down approach. I also encourage them to claim their space, because it's amazing sometimes the results you can achieve with that. So I think basically, in a nutshell, in our organization, we are going to have a very active program to try and increase representation. We will do a search for star performers. We will try to identify external talent to bring into positions. And this will require clearly sponsorship to get some of our star performers into more senior roles. So it's going to be an active program.
Thank you, Ali. No, and again, I know that's what you meant, to be honest. I just wanted to emphasize the fact that obviously the systems need to also be in place. I absolutely know you're a major advocate of DEI and having women, but you're totally right. I just wanted to emphasize both times I was playing devil's advocate. So, Fawad, what were Engro's formal enablers when it comes to trying to institutionalize sponsorship?
So there are multiple. My colleagues from HR are here. Mavish was here. Gul is here, so they can perhaps speak better on giving the list. But we have a long list of different enablers. I think the key being is the which is quite often underrated as outcome-based performance, basically, because instead of looking at the input supply chain, which is often held against women, the number of hours that you spend in the office. If the basic performance system is religiously implemented as an outcome-based, I think that could give a great impetus to inclusivity. And of course, we have to walk our talk also. So that's the key element in terms of whenever it comes to gender inclusivity. To elements like just say Ali ne kaha ke when we were looking at inducting women engineers at our plant sites, so one of the basic problems was do we have enough washrooms out in the battery limit areas? And so there was an active investment that was done, and so those sensitivities come in. I think same was implemented across the organization. I think staying alive again to the situation, the needs, there is science that tells us that air conditioning ka jo temperature hai, that is also it's different. So you have to be alive to the situation. The needs are different. So there are guidelines out there. We must recognize those and walk the talk accordingly. And so we try to do that. So we have multiple programs, including trying to take women back after their break. Also, Break Ke Baad is a program that is very successful at Engro. We have had some great colleagues coming and joining the workforce back. And apart from other multiple DI initiatives, I think Break Ke Baad is one of the great programs that we have implemented.
Thank you. I think that's really important, actually, output-based, outcome-based monitoring. And that is something that will not only obviously give a better chance to women, but overall it will benefit the entire organization.
Yeah.
That will impact your bottom line from every employee, not just the female employees that need to be working from home or have time restrictions and so on. So that's a win-win for everyone and a no-brainer really for people to implement. Umair, what does true equity infrastructure look like when it comes to sponsorship?
I'll try to be very brief in this because I know we're running out of time. First, I would like to appreciate a lot of organizations that are sitting here as well who have contributed very tangibly to that system. Pakistan Cables is sitting here, Dollans, and I was meeting some of the beneficiaries who have started franchises in Multan, women who have started the businesses and franchises there. Dubai Islamic Bank has been at the forefront of diversity and inclusion and hired the most number of people at a bank. Engro Foundation was the first to bring about diversity and inclusion together. So there have been examples in the corporate world that we have actually encountered. Going back to your question, I think in a culture it's very important, first of all, to have engagement, enabling, and then empowerment happen. How to engage, and I think this was the point that the panelists also raised. To engage, you have to have a very empowered and very independent HR. An HR that functions independently and can bring people on board who are talent disruptors. To enable, you have to create the systems, and to empower, you have to create a strategy. And I think, just going to your point, I was just looking at the statistics at our organization. We have about 200 employees across Pakistan. There's a rural-urban divide, which is extremely important to keep in mind as well. I think a lot of our conversations are sort of bookended by urban narratives, but the cultural narratives that come out of our rural areas are somehow more empowering when it comes to things, and that's been our example as well. So I looked at our board. 62% of our board are women. And not just any women, there are women like Seema Kamil, who's Deputy Governor of the State Bank of Pakistan, Ronak Lakhani and whatnot. When we come down to our leadership, 61% of our leadership are women. When we came down to our management, 58% of our management are women. And when we came down to our beneficiaries, who are women with disabilities, or 3 times worse off than disenfranchised women, we took the number from a 7% participation to a 38% participation of women with disabilities in rural and urban Pakistan. So what I was trying to tell, the infrastructure that has to be built in is a B2B infrastructure. And by B2B, and I can't take credit for coining this term, my head of marketing was sitting there, it's board to beneficiary. The B2B is extremely important. So at every step of the way, be that the board, be that the leadership, the management, as well as your customers or beneficiaries in so many ways, have to be empowered, and that needs to be embedded through your constitution, which is enshrined in your sort of policy.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. Absolutely correct. Okay, what I want to do quickly, before we go to questions and see if there are any, is give everyone 30 seconds to just say what one action can every leader in this room take tomorrow to become a better sponsor. Ali, I'll start with you.
I think you have to be willing to take risk. And if there are fewer women in leadership roles, we have to be willing to take risk, we have to believe. And I took that risk and I was delighted with the outcome. So I would just say that more leaders need to take risk in identifying and promoting women in leadership.
Fawad, please.
Yeah, so taking risk, I think, is not being myself, the usual risk averse when it comes to inclusivity. I think taking risk is the key thing. And of course, I would like to keep myself educated. You know, it's a kind of issue that you'll never be able to learn about enough about. So I think keeping oneself informed is very important.
Arshad, please.
Okay, I think it's a continuous process. I mean, we have to keep on pushing this agenda forward, and we need to make sure that we don't detract from this. So this is where we should be, and this is how it should be. And I think the best way is to keep on hammering this issue again and again and again so that it gets inculcated within the organization.
Thank you. Umair, one thing that you would say, one thing that anyone here who has the ability to sponsor can do tomorrow to make this a more active, proactive activity?
Sure. I think keeping your ear to the ground and listening to the stories that are emanating. The individual stories sometimes get lost in translation because the larger goal of the organization. So that stories are no longer success stories, they become successful stories. So I think too often we associate success stories as an anomaly. To make them part of the culture, they have to become successful stories. And I think that is what we need to do. So a leader, if they listen to the stories, their opinions and their decisions are far better informed. So listen to the stories that are emanating from the ground.
Thank you, Umair. So I think what today was all about was not about theory. We're talking about action. We're talking about actual reflection. We've heard from our amazing panelists what real sponsorship means. And we've clarified, obviously, that it means risk. It means providing access. It means systems and culture that will push women forward, not just supporting them sideways. Sponsorship is advocacy. Sponsorship is providing opportunity and providing visibility. A mentor will talk with you, but a sponsor will talk about you. And it will talk about you in the rooms that matter. So as each of you go back to your organizations, I would challenge those of you who are in a position to be a sponsor to ask yourself, who am I going to open the door for next? And how loudly will I voice my support for them in those rooms that matter the most? I want to thank everybody for listening, and to our incredible panelists, I want to say thank you for all the insights. Do we have time for questions, or we're not going to go to the audience? No? Yes, no? Okay, no, we don't have time. So we're going to call it a day here. Please, a round of applause for our amazing panelists and all the insights they've provided, and thank you all very much.